Okay, round one is complete, and in typical fashion, not an awful lot has gone on. Just some posturing, a little bit of saber rattling going on around the table, but beyond that, it's been a pretty quiet opening round here. And we'll just point out what the Germans did. They had their Anschluss with Austria here for an extra $2, but that also, because of that $2, that actually allows Britain to go up $1 on their economy. So Chamberlain, for all of his rhetoric and everything, he knew trouble when he saw it. So Britain goes up one. The Germans built a sub. They got their sub and destroyer off of the place units box, and they built I think it was a dive bomber, or not a dive bomber, pardon me, a tactical bomber, and an artillery, and a horse, maybe? Can't remember. It's pretty early in the war, I still can't remember. And then the Russians, they built a couple of artillery and moved some guys around on the rails, a couple of guys out that way, and it's kind of shoring things up a little bit. The Japanese, on this end of things, didn't start any war. They're keeping things peaceful as they muster their troops. Using G-hole here as a spot to get things together. And they built some specialty troops, a couple of SNLF, so the Special Naval Landing Force troops here. So that's these guys, and handy-dandy little tokens here. All right, there you go. And then a couple of airborne, just using the generic airborne roundels, and some red troops so that they stand out a little bit. As we know, the Japanese troops, when they win a battle, you can roll a die, and if you get a 12, I believe, then they can become veteran troops, which is usually red guys, so we'll just have to be careful with that. But for now, there has been no battling. Nationalist China backed off the coast because in every game they just get absolutely owned by the naval bombards, and as we know with bombards, can't fire back. All right, they're dead instantly. In Global War 1936 here. So we backed them off the coast and just say, you know what, we'll hang on to those $6 until Japan takes them, in which case all of these troops become nationalist Chinese. Of course, except for the commies. I mean, they're with Mao Zedong there, and he's not going to let them go green, as it were. The Anzac is just saving their money. Calcutta is just building they're going to be building a fortification here. So that's over on the board getting built. Italy, nice and peaceful down here in Africa, and kind of worrisome to the British Empire. They didn't even take Abyssinia, which doesn't cause any grief for anybody. But of course, Abyssinia is not worth anything monetarily here at the beginning, but it is a victory condition for Italy, so they'll have to take that sometime. That's something that they'll want to look into. The British brought their bomber down from London down to Malta in an interesting move. See how that pans out. The French didn't really do much. They're also building a fortification for their nation, and the British brought their army, their fleet, home fleet here to the west side of Ireland, and just to keep it out of the range of any persnickety Germans who might try some sort of weird sneak attack. But beyond that, America not doing much, just saving her money as well. She's got $12 now. But the Spanish Civil War is on, and funny enough, you see a couple of white chips because, as you know, if you've played Spanish Civil War, to get reinforcements in this, it's done with a die roll. And so you look at how many territories you own and you roll a die, and if you get that number or less, you get either 1 free infantry or 2 free militia. And as you can see, the nationalists in yellow only have 2 mainland territories. They do have the island, the Balearic Islands, and they do have Spanish Morocco, but that they don't count in this roll. So they actually rolled a 2, so they got a free infantry. And then the Republicans in purple said, well, we can do that, and they rolled a 4, so they got a free infantry they put in Madrid. So some things heating up, but neither Germany or Italy sent anything to the nationalists, and Russia decided to build her own stuff. It looks like Spain might be left alone this game. We do have the one nationalist troop from the Balearic Islands on this Italian transport. And you're wondering what's that for? Well, that's just one of the little notes that HBG put out, so that it was on the Balearic Islands here, covered by some French subs right now, just sitting there, and it was kind of pointless because, you know, they had a contingent there, but the Italians lent a transport so they could get out and join the fight, because those fascists are all friends, are they not? So that's what's going on there. One minor note as well, the Far East Command moved their battleship from Calcutta over this way. So it looks like they're trying to make Africa something worth fighting over. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll get back to you at the end of round 2. Just one quick note here. We're going to give you a little shot of the production chart. Nothing really got moved, except the stuff off of the place units box, of course. And then you see the Far East Command and the French fortifications being built. And just the updated economies, which haven't really changed much. We know Great Britain went up because of their because of the German Anschluss with Austria. So the Germans went up 2, Britain went up 1. Japan remains at 16, but they do get +3 from America because the Japanese are working and playing well with others, which means that they get their +3 bonus. And but as for every attack that they do against China, that goes down by 1. So after 3 attacks, they're getting nothing, of course, from America. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how long Japan wants to hold on to that oil money. I don't know if I mentioned it, but we are also playing with the secret subs. And as you know, we are playing with the Spanish Civil War. All right, we'll get back to you round 2. Okay, so we had a little bit of action on this round. We'll get to that in just a second. The Germans got their U-boats just out, just patrolling. Nothing, you know, going on there, just stretching their sea legs, as it were. They bought some men and another tactical and an artillery. So it looks like they're tooling up for a little bit of offensive action. Just going east or west is the only question right now. Russia sensed an opportunity. So they bought themselves an artillery, because they have $8, so that's 4, and that's 4 left over, and they were able to actually lend-lease a light armor unit to the Republicans because they saw that the nationalists had failed their role this time, but had also dropped off that fellow here. So the nationalists have now done their bit for you know, stirring things up, and the Republicans have answered. Neither of them got their rolls this turn though, but now there's some armor on the ground. So Germany and Italy might do something about that next round. We'll see what they do. The Japanese, again, kinder, gentler Japan, as it were. They did move up a carrier and a cruiser on the production chart. And then they also built a couple of more SNLF troops here and a regular infantry. And they landed their previous build of SNLF over there in G-Hole, but still have not attacked. Waiting for enough troops to actually hit the mainland, and knowing that there's going to be a whole bunch of really angry KMT people coming at them. If we just take a quick look at the build chart, actually, you'll see things have been moving up for some of the countries. Italy and Germany and France have left the battle wagons there for now, though, and France's cruiser, of course. But everybody else has been moving things up. We'll see where these things end up. You also see that there is a couple of factories being built, just little minor guys. One for the Italians and one for the Brits. So we'll see. The Brits obviously started this round, and the Italians felt they had to match them measure for measure. And so forgot to put the Italian build marker, because they are building one here in Tripoli. So there is a factory being built in Tripoli. Beyond that, you'll see a whole bunch of blue boats everywhere. They've just scattered to the four winds. And this is an interesting move by France. The plus side is that if you roll for these ships and they go Vichy, they're just scattered and they won't cause a whole bunch of grief, and they're a little kind of easy pickings. And the the plus side too is if they're free French, then they're tough for the Axis to take care of. So we'll see how the rolls do for those boats, and that'll be an interesting thing to see. I mean, you even got a French sub down here. You may have noticed earlier on that this fella from Saigon had hopped on a transport and come over to Calcutta. Can't do that, so we put him back, because you can't share a zone with a different power until you're aligned, and you're not aligned until you're both at war with the same country. So until Germany attacks France, or England for that matter, then those two cannot share the same spot. The British did pull their fella out of Hong Kong though last turn and brought him over to Malay, and he had a guy in Burma, so they've brought them over on the transports. So we have a couple of transports and 4 men. So we'll see what they do. The Italians finally gave in to the global pressure to show like you're an actual true nation, and took Abyssinia with the loss of just a single infantry. So worth it for them. Some prestige there for Mussolini. And nothing else was built besides that factory. They get $7, so they saved their 2. The Americans were actually able to, they built an artillery, and they also moved up their carrier and cruiser, as I pointed out before. And the KMT just decided to make some babies over here and have some more troops lined up in the mess there. The Communist Chinese have held on to their money for now, so kind of odd, but we'll see what they do. Alright, so that is the end of the January of 1937 turn. We'll be moving on to the July turn right away. Stay tuned. Alright, here we are. We've just completed the July 1937 turn. And heading into 1938, things are definitely heating up. We'll start over here in Europe. And the Germans were able to go in and take Slovakia. Now, as you know, Slovakia can have a resistance. The British and the French can empower the Slovakians to stand up to Hitler and the Wehrmacht. But if they're unsuccessful, it's a big boost to Hitler and whatnot. And so the British actually lose 3 IPPs, which at this stage of the game is not a good idea. And the French lose 1. And that's not just IPPs, that's actual production. Like, it's just not good. So you don't want to do that. So they just let them take it. So yeah, pretty spineless, but true to fashion of the real deal. The Germans also brought their U-boats farther out into the Atlantic Ocean, and they purchased a couple of motorized infantry there in Munich, and a couple of artillery, because they can tow them. So look out, they could go either way here, so just be ready. They can get into Poland from there, or they could go into France, so it's a sneaky spot to go. See what he does. The Soviets had a bit of good fortune. They decided to lend-lease another tank down to the Spanish, and they actually ended up winning. Now the tank actually arrived here and didn't take place in the battle, didn't take part in the battle. But the Republicans were lucky enough to get a hit with their fighter on the first round, and as you know, with aircraft, when you get a hit with an aircraft, with a fighter, then the other guy has to take an aircraft off. So that took care of the nationalist fighter, who missed on its roll. So from then on, it was pretty much just a slugfest, with the odd snipe going in with the 2 planes here, because these planes made the difference. And but I mean, the Republicans lost all their infantry, so it wasn't as though it was a total cakewalk. But it is now Republican Spain. So when that happens, all of the nationalist troops, if there were any on the board, because one starts in the Balearic Islands, a couple in Spanish Morocco, maybe there'd be some left in Spain. No, I guess there wouldn't be, but anything in the outlying colonies, they just get taken off the board. They're removed. And so Republican Spain is now here, so that is a victory condition for the Comintern. And Spain is now officially neutral, so nobody can go in there. They are neutral, and there you go. So they're not going to be doing anything, but once Russia and Germany are at war, it can then it'll instantly align with the Soviet Union. As you know, with alignment, it means then that Republican Spain forces can be used by the Soviet player. All right, so not that there's much left there, but we'll see how things go. On to Japan. Japan decided to open things up, and the war is well and truly joined in the Far East. And they did a landing in Peking and took Taiwan, not to be confused with Taiwan, this territory just south of Peking. And their bombards were fairly devastating for the attack on Peking. Taiwan only has one militia, so they just ran in there. But as you can see, there are 3 SNLF, and there were 4, so that militia actually got a hit. Actually rolled a 2, so took out one of the SNLF. So the Japanese player decided not to lose 2 infantry on that, which is probably a good idea. And nationalist China now is completely joined up. Everybody's all together now, so decent stack of cash too. They made $8 this last round because they gather up all the money that that they have, and so there's a 2, a 2, a 2, a 1, and a 1, which equals 8 if my elementary math is still spot on. But we'll see what the Chinese do. Typically they head for the hills in this game, because if you're on the coast, you're toast. Yeah, the bombards, the fighters, and everything, it's ugly. So we'll see though what happens here in the Far East. Down in Anzac, they are deciding to upgrade their factory. So they spent their money on their $5 on that. Calcutta, who just completed a nice defensive fortification there, is now building a major factory, upgrading it. They also sent some of their buddies over to Egypt here on these transports, because the British Empire, the Commonwealth, can work together. So that's what they're doing, trying to save that. They finished their minor factory in Cairo, and they're going to start cranking out units. But so did the Italians. So that'll be interesting to see what goes on there. That's pretty much it. The British built a destroyer and finished off the factory. So that was all their money. They might have saved 1, I think. America just saved her money, but America has jumped up to 11 now. She was languishing at 6, but thanks to the Japanese attack on the KMT, they get a +5. So they're way up to 11 now, and since they saved money last couple rounds, I think they're going to have like 17 or 18 to spend next turn. So, woohoo, big cashola. Alright, we will let you know what goes on with the first turn of January 1938. Alright, here we are at the end of the January 1938, and well, a few interesting things have been happening, but looks like we're heating up for the real shooting war here. Germany brought everything north, put it into Western Germany there, and on the border with Belgium. Looks like the Schlieffen Plan Part 2 might be happening here. Or should I say Zwei, Part 2? I don't speak German very well. But yeah, that could be a problem for France. We'll see what he does. Also, you may have noticed last turn that Slovakia was taken. Well, Germany forgot to actually move in the troops he said was coming, so we had to move the 3 Austrian troops in. And then they just got to move back to Austria this turn, so got to keep that German player honest. You. Alright. Now we have Japan, which continues to gobble up the coastal territories, and these are important to Japan. Each of them are worth $1. So he's making 5 bonus bucks right now just for having coastal territories. As soon as he can get Guangxi down here in the south, he'll have $6 per turn just for holding the coast. So I know some Chinese players might fight for that, but again, with all the bombards and the air power, you're just not going to be long for this world. But Japan built some artillery and a bunch of guys. Last turn completed a cruiser, and they also built a motorized built an artillery there and just brought in a motorized guy. So trying to load up the mainland a bit. Of course, they're using the token now for the Navy. So if we pull back here, and we'll go over and see that. And it'll definitely grow because we haven't put the carriers on. They're still back here at Japan. So it'll definitely grow as time goes on. So that's what the Japanese did. Anzac completed its major factory. So now it can build up to 5 things. Mathematically impossible when you're only making $4 a round, but at least it's there. And the nice thing is, some people might say, well, why build it? The Japanese will just take it and use it. Well, remember, you can only crank 1 out if you take somebody's major. So, yeah, as long as they can hold it and maybe get some cash flowing, and once they get up to a full war income of 7, they'll be able to build a couple of guys each round. But we'll see how that goes. Calcutta also finished its major. And didn't do much else, just kind of waiting and seeing what the Japanese are going to do here. Of course, the British have their factory completed here in Cairo and built an artillery. And the Italians, forgot to put their build on. Oh no, you put it in the wrong spot. You wanted to put it in Africa, right? Yeah? Okay. They wanted to put that artillery in Africa. Just trying to build up a force here in the sand. Russia built artillery and saved some cash, I believe. Or no, yeah, they're saving some cash because I think they want to build another fighter next turn. France just built some fellows and put a couple into the Maginot Line, but are seeing now with Belgium being on the table, looks like he's going to come through Picardy. See what happens there. The Brits built a fighter at home, as well as the artillery there in Cairo. That was all their money. You can see what the French did, though. He put his fleet, scattered everything to the wind here. Again, what happens is that when Paris falls, you roll for it, and you roll for each individual boat. There's even one way down here, pulling the old Magellan thing. And you roll for each ship, and it could go Free French, it could go Vichy, it could be scuttled, it could go Axis. If it goes Vichy, it'll go to the nearest Vichy port, which there's a number that it could be, depending on the die rolls, of course. And if he rolls an 11 or 12, I believe, it'll become a German boat. But it stays where it is. You just replace it. So then all these boats, if some of them go German, they actually have a couple of turns to work their way back to get into the game. And if they go to be allied, well, that's great. But at least it's not a big grouping of boats. We'll see if that strategy pays off. The dice can be harsh mistresses, as we know. Yeah, America, we already went over them. They finished off no, we didn't. We'll come over here. Finished off an aircraft carrier and bought themselves a fighter. And that was aircraft carrier and a cruiser, pardon me. So that was $8. And then the fighter was $10, and that was all their money. So that's what things have transpired here in the first 6 months of 1938. And the next 6 months are coming up right away. Alright folks, we have just completed the July of 1938 maneuver, and Things are starting to heat up a bit here. We'll start, as we usually do, with the Germans, and as you can see, they've got some medium armor, and the little guys right beside them there, those, I think they're called Kampfpanzerwagen or something like that. They're mechanized that they can have. So they can build medium armor and mechanized in July of 1938 before everybody else can. Yeah, so that's a little scary for people. And yeah, they've put all their subs down here in C-Zone 79, which is pure gold, because there are 3 different convoy lines that come in there. So if they roll well enough, they can actually hit Britain for 15. Unlikely, because, you know, when Britain gets going here, they're going to be putting escort vessels on the lines, but for right now, if they roll really well, that can completely erase British economy almost. But the Germans did not attack. They're just merely moving things up, and as you can see, the French response was to pretty much empty the Maginot Line. So the Maginot Line is still there, and there's still one guy in it. Plus, the Maginot Line itself is a pretty decent fortress unto itself, but it's unlikely the Germans will just send armor at it. That'd be pretty expensive, but we'll see if he does. The Russians built an artillery, or a couple of artillery down here in Kiev. You see a couple more chips there on the artillery, and moved a couple of guys around, but really not a lot going on for the Russians. They're just kind of status quo at this time. I guess we'll stay in the European theater right now. So the British brought a fighter down here, because as you know, in order to actually combat submarines, you need a fighter on aircraft or on combat aircraft patrol. So put them on cap, and then you can take out the subs. They also moved their fleet into the English Channel. Now their fleet, I'll just come around here, is that. So it's pretty impressive. Couple of battle wagons, 3 cruisers, 6 destroyers, and a torpedo boat destroyer, along with a couple of subs and transports. But they can actually get down to where 79 is. So Germany, you might want to move your subs, but we'll see if he does. So the British built another artillery at home. Now I think the British player moved that because he was worried about a possible sea lion. It's unlikely a sea lion would have worked, but it is highly probable that the British player would have lost all of his units in London just with a simple massed air attack and landing a couple of guys and whatnot. So who knows? We'll see who's playing who here. Italy, as long as we're staying in Europe, Italy built a fighter and moved some more guys down here, and then built an artillery in Tripoli and moved some guys down. But also, you might be wondering how they're building so much. Well, they saved some money when they were building their factory. They didn't spend any, so they actually saved some money as they went along building that. And yeah, so they were able to do pretty much almost a double build there. I guess a double build. Not much going on in Cairo. A fighter was built here by the British last turn. So just wanting to keep the Italians honest there. See how that goes. Calcutta just built a couple of men. Now they can build more than one thing a turn. So they built 2 guys in Calcutta. Japan had a very easy time of it here in Guangxi, just north of Hong Kong. They came in and did their bombard, and their bombard hit 3 out of 4 militia. And then their infantry landing actually got a hit. They needed a 1 because it's a mountain territory. They actually got 1, and the militia missed. So yeah, that was pretty much a cakewalk. The nationalist Chinese responded. They had $4 and they built a mountain infantry in Yunnan. As you know, mountain infantry have no penalty when attacking into mountains, and they're also +1 as they defend. So those things are 5. So there's 3 5s sitting there and a bunch of 4s to meet the Japanese push. So Yunnan is looking pretty solid right now, but we'll see. We'll see. Things change. Communist China is holding on to her cash right now. Japan was loath to attack that because it would have left her pretty weak in Taiwan and whatnot. So I think Japan was just moving her stuff around a bit. Japan's fleet here in '89 is represented, of course, by this big conflagration here. Alright. That's not how you pronounce that, but hey, just having some fun. And then they built some regular infantry here. So once Japan has taken the coastline, buying the SNLF isn't quite as important. They will need some down here in the south when they go for the Money Islands. But for right now, using infantry just to bulk up the defenses in China is probably the best thing for them to do, because they do defend it at 4 and they only cost $3, whereas the SNLF is $5. So, and America built herself a destroyer and saved $4. So yeah, so that's about all that went on this turn, but it looks like war is imminent, and we will come back with the January of 1939 in just a moment. Well, the deed is done a little earlier than history records, and it's also kind of going west-east here, but we'll see what happens. Of course, Paris has fallen. Schlieffen Part 2 happened, so Belgium got sacked and threw into Picardia, and of course with the German Blitzkrieg combined with the Blitz move that anybody can do, there you have it. So the Germans have taken Paris, but not without loss. As you can see, they're down to, they kept all of their medium armor and their mechanized, but everything else died, plus 1 plane that the French fighter was able to dispatch. So yeah, there you go. Vichy, of course, forms in Marseille, and they get an artillery and aircraft and 3 infantry, and they were actually able to scoop a couple of boats. Now you remember all the French boats that were out here in the water? Well, they didn't do so well. They all got moved around to different parts, but the British ended up getting some nice trophies there. They were able to pick up a battleship and a destroyer and a sub for free, which is always nice. The Germans got nothing. Vichy, of course, got the destroyer and the sub here. So yeah, so anything that rolls for free French becomes free French, and then it can move on its turn, on France's turn. The big deal, though, is that France herself can declare a second capital, and so in this case, the Belgian Congo has been declared a French capital, which of course will not become French until they place a French unit there, but then they can get some income. So once they're planted there, they're going to be making $7 until Italy, of course, starts to scoop some of these territories here that are free French. We got 1 free French on the coast. The rest in the interior of Africa is Vichy. Really does nothing for anybody. Oh, and if you're wondering about Vichy, Vichy is, they're kind of like a strict neutral. If they get attacked by the Allies, then they'll go pro-Axis, and if they get attacked by the Germans, they'll go, or the Italians, then they will go pro-Allied. So, but since Germany collects this this money, all $1 of it, there's really no need for them to go in there. But if they wanted to secure the southern flank of France there with more than 5 units, they might have to later on. So interesting political turn there. But as you can see, lots of Vichy. But the French did capture, Free French did get Syria. These are on die rolls, by the way. 1 to 6 becomes Vichy, and 7 to 12 becomes Free French. And the Free French were able to capture Hanoi and Saigon. That's worth a couple of bucks. And they did get a sub. The transport over here got scuttled, but they did get that. And they also got New Caledonia, because you never know when you're going to have to land in New Caledonia. So that is how the German attack on France went. Heavy losses, but they did get what they wanted to. in response, the Soviets built and got some more guys up here in the north. Started packing up Leningrad a little bit. They're getting a little nervous of their friends here. We'll see what happens. Molotov-Ribbentrop is coming up in the next turn or two, so we'll see how that goes. In Africa, the Italians brought down a mountain troop and cavalry, and then they built, they built a cavalry, brought down a mountain troop and a fighter and an infantry, and they built another cavalry up here. I guess they're looking to do some quick moves. The British built an artillery in the Cairo factory. Oh, yes, the Germans, the hubris. They had their 3 subs here, and they actually took a couple of bucks off Britain. So Britain then, now that they're at war, came down. As you know, destroyers can move 3, plus the port lets them move 4, so they came down here and took the 3 subs out by putting this plane that was in Gibraltar on combat air patrol. So yeah, gotta watch out for that. The Japanese are just tooling up some more. Not a lot to be said there. They're just forming up a big wall of men. But speaking of a wall of men, here's nationalist China has brought everybody back into Yunnan. An artillery that was lend-leased from America, and they built a militia because now they're down to $2 and probably won't be going up anytime soon. Calcutta built a couple of guys. Anzac built a fella. And that's pretty much it. Not much else went on. America built a Marine over here. So I'll just show you where we're at now on our charts. So here's our income charts. And Britain is out of frame there. Get in frame, Britain. And there you have it. So we'll be moving on. That was the early 1939. We'll be moving on to the July portion of our program. Toot sweet. Alright, we are through 1939. We're headed into 1940. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the board, and then we'll walk you through what happened last round. Some interesting things happening. Little bit of a sitzkrieg over here in the Far East. And not a lot of actual combat went on this round. So we'll just we'll get into that right away here, though. So the Germans had built some armor and motorized. You can see them there, and they're just getting ready. They got they moved their mechs over to Stettin, and they're on the border with Poland. And just so you know, Molotov-Ribbentrop has been signed, but it got signed on the Soviet turn. So you see that the Germans aren't moved into Poland yet because they hadn't signed it yet, and then the Russian player said, hey, let's do it. And so they did it, and the Russian player ended up getting an extra $3. The German player will get $5 each turn from now on. But there you have it, and they're going to divide up Poland as time goes on here. Nothing going on here really for Britain. They did build a Mosquito, okay, tactical bomber there, built that, and they built a stack of 5 guys in London. And they also built something rather cool. They built an airborne unit. I love this sculpt, by the way. Oops, kind of got out of frame there for a second. I love that sculpt sitting on the black and red roundel. That's the airborne. And there is a strategic bomber in here, so it can take that airborne and drop him off anywhere the strat bomber can go. Alright, so it'll be interesting to see what the British player decides to do with that. A lot of options available. Italy, of course, continuing to pour stuff into Africa. Built an artillery here this last turn and brought down a mountain and a cavalry. And yeah, just tooling up here for a little invasion. See if the British have the horses to avoid losing Cairo here early in the war. Something of note, though, is the French, as you know, are able to declare another capital when Paris falls. So they declared the Belgian Congo. And at the end of last turn, they didn't have anything, so they collected the money from all of their territories around the board, and they had $7. They didn't own the Belgian Congo yet, okay, so there was no money for that, but their other territories give them $7. Then on this turn, they took the $7 and they built this infantry. Now this is a colonial infantry, which the French can build, and because this is their capital, but they don't have a factory, so they can't build tanks or artillery or planes or anything. So they built that for $4, and then collected their $8, because now they get one for Belgian Congo. But then their good friends over in the US of A decided to lend-lease them a fighter. And because no one is at war with the US can lend-lease to anybody who's at war with a major power, so France, and nobody can intercept it because nobody's at war with them. They are the sending nation. So they can keep funneling stuff here into Africa as long as they want. They could start helping to shore up Cairo too. The British player may be asking for that next round. We'll see. But yeah, the arsenal of democracy is able to send some stuff to some interesting places. So just realize that that is an option. That is an option, is you can start to build up the French here, and you know, for what it's worth, it's going to take Italy 1, 2, 3, at least 4 turns to get down here with any sort of force. I mean, they've got this little force here, but that would probably lose out to those 3. And plus, it'll still take a couple of turns, and the French are going to be building a couple of colonial infantry. Again, they cost 4, but they got $8 now. So by the time, if the Italians actually break through Cairo, or even if they sidestep Cairo and just say, hey, we're going to come down and take South African Union, France could actually have some stuff there. So we'll wait and see how that goes. Yeah, it's an interesting little conundrum. There is an Italian sub on patrol here on the line here, the Mediterranean line, that has British, French, and Italian interest. And so to combat that, the British put in a destroyer on escort duty. And they still have their fighter on cap in case a sub tries to get out. Now again, Italy and Britain are not at war, so that sub could go out right now, and then they could go ahead and declare war, and as long as it's not in the cap zone, it'll be alright. The Russians just decided to build some guys up here in Leningrad, and they had enough to build 4 men this turn. They had saved some money, so they built a couple in Leningrad and a couple more near the front here, just some more white discs down there. No more border clashes with the Japanese though, because there are no more border troops there, so that's all over and done with. Speaking of the Japanese, they still have not attacked into China, and a little bit of catcalling going on there, a little bit of chicken, but the Japanese player has not succumbed to the pressure. Good for him. But he did build a strategic bomber, and he does have airborne troops. So now he can drop those airborne troops, you know, behind enemy lines. One at a time, mind you, but it's still an option for him now. Okay, so of course Far East Command now has to be aware of that. And the other thing that the Japanese player did was brought down the Special Naval Landing Force, so it's on a coastline, and there's other Sentinel F troops down here. Now remember, their special thing is that if they get hit, you only lose 1 troop instead of 2, like you do with normal infantry. And in these 2 zones here, you have 3 transports, and then here you got a couple more. And remember, the Japanese can move 4 on their sneak attack. Alright, and they get their a whole bunch of little bonuses. And those 3 transports are within range of Calcutta, as is this monstrous fleet. So who knows what could happen? There's the bombards and all the rest, and they've got their air power. I don't think it's quite in range yet, but we're getting close to the time where Calcutta might want to do something about that. We'll see. They built artillery and some men last time. Now FEC and Anzac are at war because of Germany attacking France, which brought Great Britain into the war. So the Commonwealth is at war now. So there's some bonuses happening for FEC and Anzac, a couple of bucks here and there. So Japan It's going to have to start making more money. They're not making any more money than they did a turn ago, and so they might have to just bite the bullet and do something. Now the Chinese again have this monstrous stack of infantry. Horrible on attack. Many of them could run away. Remember, when they attack, if they roll a 10, 11, 12, they just turn around and run away. So they're pretty impotent on attack, especially attacking into mountains. They're going to be at 1. Except for the mountain infantry. They got some mountain infantry there. So, but I think China's biggest thing is keeping Yunnan open, which is the Burma Road, which of course is going to make Burma a great big target. All things to consider here in Global War 1936. And America with their Lend-Lease. And then they also decided, instead of building a unit this turn, they decided to do just a little bit of technology. And so did Japan. So at the top we see the Americans got advanced artillery. And they got long-range aircraft, but the Japanese also got long-range aircraft. And America also got wartime economy, because who doesn't need more money? Now, they can't get that yet, right? They can't use it because they're not at war. But as soon as they're at war, they'll be able to roll that dice and get some money. There's also an Anzac fortification being built, as we look at our situation here, in Sydney. All right, well, that's it for the July 1939. We're headed into 1940. This is the time that an American journalist called the phony war, because nothing really happened. But France has already fallen, so I think we're rewriting history a bit here. And Poland is about to be invaded. And around this time, a lot of these neutrals start getting some extra troops, extra units on the board, because they notice that everybody's getting a little frisky out there. And so some of our minor neutrals, some of our pro-ally, pro-axis type neutrals, they start to tool up a little bit for war, but again, they don't align automatically. They're still waiting for the right set of circumstances. But you'll see that some of these white armies start to grow a little bit as time goes on. All right, well, we'll just take care here of the 1940 and I'll let you know how it goes. All right. Okay, an interesting round. Things kind of opened up here on the Eastern Front. The Germans and the Russians, with Molotov, Ribbentrop in full effect, have now taken all of Poland. Germans took some decent losses in West Poland, but Warsaw itself fell pretty quickly. Unfortunately for Germany, they forgot to activate, align one of the miners down here last turn, so they're a miner behind. But once they take Romania, that also gives a bonus to the Soviet Union, so it's not all bad. But they do that in the place units phase. They just go ahead and align one of those. So they got Hungary this last round, and probably Romania next round. The Soviet Union started building a fort in Moscow and continue to build infantry as best they can. Not making a lot of money. They have $10 plus the 3 from the treaty with Germany. So they're sitting at about a little less than a third of what the Germans are making, and the Germans have a lot more to start with. So we'll see about the whole trading space for time thing. Once war is declared, they can also start moving their factories out of harm's way. So we'll see what goes on there. Britain moved its fleet from the English Channel over one and added a couple of transports to it and an artillery at home. And they started building a fortress in Cairo here, and so we'll see what goes on there. The Italians continue to build up in Africa. Italy's a bit of a strange duck in this game because they are at peace with everybody, and so they can just build and build and build and build and build and never attack the entire game. Now, they're not going to win their victory objectives, but they can certainly frustrate the Allies, because Britain's spending quite a bit of time, money, and energy down here in Cairo, and it might all be for naught, but it might be pulling British resources from other places. So that's something to keep in mind in this game, is that Italy does not have to go to war. Of course, Italy will go to war, but it doesn't have to go to war. And of course, as soon as it does go to war, they are very weak at home. They don't have a lot going on. And please take special note, Rome does not have a factory. So you cannot just quickly build a bunch of stuff there. You can build some militia, you could build some black shirt militia if you want, but they're not going to stand up to a bunch of British Marines or American Marines or somebody landing. It's just going to be ugly. All right, so be careful with Italy. It's kind of strung out, got a lot of stuff out here, but again, as soon as they go into Egypt or into Tunis just to get some quick cash and start the war, it's going to take them a while to get things built up at home. They're only going to be making a few bucks, so be careful of that. And also the British fleet here, which could cause some minor annoyance. Now the Italians definitely have more strength than the British here, but it's at home is where their problems lie. So be careful if you're playing Italy. You also can't get your fleet out of the Med. Until you take Gibraltar and until you take the Suez, you can't get out of the Med. So just be very careful. The other thing that happened in Africa was the Americans getting a little cheeky. Lend-lease medium armor, because here we are in 1940, so medium armor is of course available. And the French built a couple of colonial infantry for $8, which is their income right now. So the French are actually, they're building up a little bit of strength here thanks to US, and so that's something else for the Italian player to consider. All right, I think you might be digging a hole for yourself there, buddy. So we'll see. Calcutta just planted a nice red chip of men at the bottom there, so built 5 men and turning that into a veritable fortress. But we all know how well fortresses do in modern warfare, so we'll see. We have some action, some real exciting action actually here in China. First of all, communist China has ceased to be. The Japanese sent in a bunch of planes and 6 men and 5 or 6 mountain infantry, and they ended up, they still have 3 or 4 chips there of mountain. It looks like 3 chips of mountain infantry, so 4 mountain infantry left. But they lost all their infantry and 1 mountain infantry, so it wasn't cheap. But communist China is no longer a threat. The other thing that happened was here in Shaanxi, after the nationalists saw that, they went, hey, we can war too. So they attacked Peking. They came screaming out of the mountains, and Peking said, no, you don't. And actually, both sides lost a fair amount of stuff, but it was obvious that the Chinese were not going to win. And in fact, their 2 infantry ran back. That's why they're not dead. They ran back. So, again with China, this stack here looks very foreboding, and in defense it very much is, to say nothing of some militia and the mountain guys as well. But in attack, very, very impotent, if you'll pardon the word. Just do not have a very effective attack. So if you're China, be careful with that. Anzac finished off their fortress down here and built 1 more man, and now they'll be putting in 3 or 4 men each round, building that up a bit. I'm certain that's the idea. Building ships when the Japanese have this floating around just seems a little counterproductive. The Japanese have gotten all of their transports together, all 5 of them, and now they have 5 mountain and 5 infantry. This is scary because this has a lot of different possibilities, and they could bust out next round. We'll see what happens because they look pretty secure on the mainland here. I don't know if Nationalist China is going to risk the annihilation of their forces with a big frontal attack. I doubt it, but we'll see. The American player is kind of crazy, so we'll see. America herself did the Lend-Lease of the tank and then spent $5 on some more technology, and they tried to advance artillery and missed. But they did advance long-range aircraft and their wartime economy, and they got improved shipyards. Okay. They also rolled for improved factories, but failed. So here we are. Here's our board as it stands right now. I think you can see everything there. There we go. And we are just moving into July 1940. You can see the forts being built here, and these ships have not moved. It looks like people aren't real fleet happy right now. Looks like we're looking at a bit of a ground pound war. And we'll see how that goes in the rest of the year 1940. Alright, looks like we are through the entire 1940, and we'll be starting our 1941 turn in just a moment. So Germany has surged forward, brought a lot of things forward here. Things are looking a little bleak actually for the Soviets. But the Germans do have a lot of work to do. They did build a couple of stacks of men and move the stack they had in Berlin out to head out to the Polish frontier. They did activate Romania, so they got a stack of men and a fighter and cavalry and whatnot there, so they got a few extra things for free, of course. The Russians actually get a bonus for that, though. When any Axis power controls a territory next to the Soviet home country, they roll a d12 to increase their income, and they rolled a 12. Lucky for them. And you know, while I'm talking about rolling for income, we're just going to move on over to the income chart, because we had rolled, but we for some reason forgot. Don't look at me, that wasn't my fault. To move up the incomes for some of the guys last round. And so here's where we stand with incomes, because as you know, in July 1939, both the Soviets and the Americans will roll a d12 and add that to their war income as it creeps up higher and higher, and at some point they can declare war. If they get invaded or attacked first, of course they shoot up to their war income levels automatically, but that's how that goes. So America has had pretty decent rolls. So in 3 rolls they go from 16 up to 35, so that's not too bad. And the Soviets got up to 32 from 10. So they both have done fairly well, just a bit above average, like 7 and 8s above average, okay? Out of the average, if there is an average there, I think is like 6.5 or something. So, all right, so yeah, so that's what the Germans did. The Soviets just built a couple more men and finished off the bunker in Moscow. But not much else is going on there. Obviously, we know what's coming, and it looks pretty sparse in the Soviet Union. So I don't know if the Soviet player is going to put anything in there, but he's got a plan. He's a man with a plan. Old Stalin. The Germans built another man in Paris just because, and is just waiting for the British to try a landing in France, but not sure if the British player is going to take the bait. He was thinking about it, but figures it might be a trap, so there might be something else happening pretty soon. In Africa, the Italians moved everything forward, but still have yet to attack. But they might want to do that pretty soon. I don't know if Italy wants to hold on much longer. They're only making $7. Just can't compete financially with the Brits, or for that matter, with the French. The French built another couple of colonial troops because they get $8, so that's 2 troops. And America sent them another tank. So right now, the French have more armor in Africa than Italy and Great Britain combined. So figure that one out. Moving over this way, Calcutta switched it up a little bit. Instead of just building men, built a fighter and an artillery and some men. Again, their income is up at 14, plus a couple for, I believe, Aden being held by the British. So I think the Axis have got to get on their horses a little bit, because the Allies outproduce them to a great extent now financially. So I think the next round we'll see some interesting things. Now you may notice a Soviet tactical fighter here, or a tactical bomber, is sitting in Xinjiang, and you're wondering, what the heck is going on? Well, the Russians are able to send a fighter down to help out nationalist China. Well, this last round, some things happened, and this is after the Russians' turn, so he's probably going to pull it back. We know Communist China died. The Japanese attacked Shaanxi and just got diced hard. The Chinese wiped out so much stuff that even the Japanese were left with fighters and a couple of mountain troops, but they pulled back because, well, only the Japanese player can tell you. But I think it was just so many losses, and it's only worth 1 point, and so I think they're going to regroup and try to take it next round and lose something a little less valuable than a mountain infantry, which they're definitely going to need to take on China here. All right, but they have brought everything down here, and we'll see. Now, just so you guys remember, if you don't know, if you do know, you'll remember, and if you don't know, I'm going to tell you. Japan gets a sneak attack on the first time they attack somebody other than China. And in that case, all their ships can move +1. Defenders get -1 on their defense. Now remember, in this game, you can declare war at any time. Alright? But knowing that there's a +1 movement, and there's a naval port here in Formosa that the Japanese can use, and remember that fleet is actually this one here. All that stuff there is able to move a minimum of 4 on that attack. So if we just count this out, we'll see here. This is here, so we can go 1, 2, 3. Oh my. So Calcutta is definitely within range, even without the sneak attack. But if we look this way, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and could land in Queensland. Now the sneak attack bonus won't really help them a lot against militia, but then they could be in Sydney in a couple of turns, and I'm not sure if the Aussies have the horses to combat that. So we have 2 capitals that are under threat thanks to that Japanese preemptive strike, that surprise attack that they have. So this huge stack of men here, you know, could be attacking in China here, but might be better served going elsewhere. We'll see what our player thinks when he gets back from the Biffy. So America, with its fat stack of cash, is now looking at building 3 more minor factories here in San Francisco to crank out some more boats and whatnot. They built a couple of transports there last round, and then when those new factories are built, probably cranking out some more troops and units and whatnot to go and harass the Japanese. Well, folks, we'll see what happens here, but I think 1941 is going to be a very, very interesting year, much like it was in our real world. Alright, take care, folks. Here it comes. Alright, as predicted, the Axis have busted out. Well, some of the Axis have. Germany has punched through here. They got their little sneak attack, which typically doesn't amount to much against Russia because the Russians see it coming. So a couple of guys died out pretty quickly. But the one place where it really took a toll was in Kiev. Russians lost everything in there except 1 armor, which then fled north. But the Germans also lost a few armor, three armor, I think, going into there on their blitz move. So it wasn't cheap or easy, but there you go. They've punched through, and the Soviet Union looks pretty ripe for the taking here. Now you'll notice that Kiev is empty, and it used to have an air base and a factory. Yeah, well, that's scorched earth, folks. That's the Soviets' prerogative. They can just zorch any facility that they want as they retreat. You'll also notice that the major factory that was in Oral-Kursk is no longer there. That's because it's been moved up to Moscow. So the Soviets also have the factory movement option. 1 point to move a minor factory and 2 points to move a major. Now, unfortunately, that's all your movement points when you're using the rail in Russia, but it was well worth it to save that factory from certain doom coming up here, as we see a lot of tanks, and there's some mechs in there and whatnot. So it's yeah, not looking good there. But we'll see how the Russians can hold on the next little bit. They built another 5 men in Moscow. and moved a bunch of guys up closer. They built another 5 guys up in Leningrad as well. And of course, that really affects the money. All right, the money gets affected quite a bit by this. So we'll just take a look at what we got here. This time the boys remembered to move their chits. So well, of course, they've always forgotten to move the French one. I've got to talk to Maurice about that. So here we go. The Germans and the Russians right now are equal. The Germans didn't get that the money from the Soviet territories, though, because as you know, when an invader gets Soviet territory, the first round it has it, it doesn't glean any income from it. So that's a bit of a bummer for the Germans, but what can you do? The Japanese also inched up a bit. I guess that was a couple turns ago, because this turn something interesting happened. They didn't actually attack anybody except the Chinese again, and they did have some nominal success. So we have these strategic bombers here. They've built 3 of them now, and because of the success last round, they built 2 more. And I'll show you what the success is. This, of course, is doctored and edited for film footage, but there are 3 Strad bombers rolled that. Now, strategic bombers can be shot down by intercepting fighters and can be shot down by anti-aircraft, but the Chinese, Nationalist Chinese, had neither of those at the time, and so they just thought they'd fly over and give it a whirl, and well, look at that. They killed 3, but the Japanese invaded, and the Chinese rolled horribly, but they still killed a good number of Japanese infantry. But the Chinese lost their militia and a couple cavalry and a couple of infantry. So it was kind of more of a skirmish than a full-blown war, but there you have it. The Japanese also moved their fleet down here, so now they have even a greater reach. So if they chose to do their sneak attack, well, they can go quite a ways. They can only go 3 this time, though, because they don't have a naval base. I guess he forgot to build one there. I think he was talking about it. But that would 1, 2, 3. So they could come out to here on a sneak attack, although there's not much to attack there. I don't think there's anything else. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, there's not much else. So he's probably kicking his own butt right now for not building a naval base. But once they take Hong Kong, that won't be a problem, but you don't want to spend your big attack on an empty spot, your sneak attack. So, but that's what the Japanese did. They built 2 more bombers, and then they built a tactical right there in Korea. So they're concentrating on air power, I think, and that's probably to take care of all this big Chinese problem. You know, you use air power and a stack of infantry, you might lose a bunch of infantry, but you're killing the infantry as well. So, and you can afford to replace them, and the Chinese can't. But while you're doing that, fellows down here in Sydney are building up more stuff. This time they just built an airborne and left it at that. So I think there's probably a bomber on the way or an air transport on the way. We'll see what happens. Calcutta built another fighter and a man and an artillery. That seems to be the status quo. Nothing was built in Cairo, and the Italians also built nothing. But the French, moving up, taking a little bit of a drive up through here, and probably causing the Italians a little bit of a fit. But Italy just built a man and artillery in turn. Now Italy again only makes $7, and they're not at war with anybody, so they can't be invaded. But the British have made a bit of a bold move. They brought down 8 units down to Gibraltar, 6 men, 2 infantry on their transports. Of course, that token is representative of the fleet up there. There you go. And so the British built that. But now the British have also completed the light carrier. It's a light carrier and a cruiser, and then they built 3 destroyers out of the reach of any Luftwaffe intentions. So looks like the British have command of the Atlantic, and the Germans don't seem too interested in fighting it. Now some of you might be asking, you know, why aren't the British just landing in France and, you know, causing the Germans some grief over here? Yeah, they could do that. But it really wouldn't cause that much grief. It's only $1, right? Maybe $2. And the Germans could, in one turn, come back and just wipe everything out, and it's all done, and the British have to start building up again. So what the British fellow has chosen to do is to come down here. So from Gibraltar, with its beautiful naval ports, he can threaten both Germany as well as, well, I mean France, but the German holdings in France. And he can also threaten Rome herself. And they can also come and reinforce Cairo. So really, it looks like Italy's kind of out of this game here. They don't seem to have a lot going for them. We'll see what happens, though. They might start to try to take some of the neutrals, but we'll see what goes on. But they're in a tough way here. I think Italy waited too long to make her move, and but I could be proven wrong. I've been proven wrong before. But these guys are kind of trapped down here, no way out. Yeah, so that's about it. Not much else to say here. The Germans built nothing but armor last round. And they put one in Sudetenland, and they put one in Warsaw, and they put one in Romania, and then they put a stack of 5 in Stettin. So they'll be heading east with those. Alright, well, we'll see what the rest of the rest of 1941 holds. We'll see if Japan is actually going to get a little bit more imperial here, because so far they've been just going after China. But this could be the day China dies too. They're actually taking it on the chin, and it's hard for them to get things back. America did lend-lease the fighter. They didn't give anything to the French this round, because the French seem to be doing all right. So they did lend-lease a fighter to them. That is, of course, the Flying Tiger. They can only do that once in the game, and then no more. So the next attack Japan does, it's likely that fighter will die as the Japanese fighters shoot it out of the sky, but it might take one of them with it. Alright, one other slight note that I may have glossed over a little bit. The British also built an airborne troop down in South Africa. Interesting. We'll see what's up with that. And the other thing you may notice is that some of the neutrals have gotten a little bit more powerful as time goes on. Because if you look in the neutral setup charts, it'll say, if still neutral at this time, add an infantry or add a militia. The Netherlands got an extra man, and they got a shiny new destroyer, so, you know, a little bit of kickback there. Now, you might be asking, why didn't Germany take the Netherlands? Well, because if they take the Netherlands, then the United Kingdom gets all of the income from down here, which amounts to $9. And so for the Germans to take the 2, but the 2 or the 3 the Netherlands is worth, and give up 9 to the Brits, just not worth it. So, alright, we will let you know what happens. Oh, I guess I gotta show you the tech charts here. We have the tech charts, and the Americans spent $10 on tech, and they had 3 things head up. So long-range aircraft, wartime economy, and the improved shipyards. But they failed at advanced artillery, can't get that thing to move, and they failed at heavy bombers, so it just stays in the first stage. Alright folks, we'll get right back at it. We're headed into July of 1941. Alright, here we are at the end of 1941. We're going to be heading into 1942 here. And, well, I tell you, things are looking a little bleak for the Ruskies. I mean, they've got a lot of guys in Moscow, but the Germans are coming, and they're gobbling up territory. They took 7 away from Russia last turn, and they're looking to take probably another 5 or 6 this turn, maybe more. We'll see what the Russians can do. Remember that blitz move, though, folks, that your tanks and your mech and any planes that still have movement after the first attack can punch through to the second zone. So just remember that. That really makes German armor, which obviously they'll have in spades, very, very, very potent, especially on the expanses of the Soviet Union. Well, the Germans finally went and took care of that fleet up there in Leningrad, but they took a lot of damage themselves. But were able to get rid of any sort of threat that the Russian Navy may have. They built another guy in Paris and actually brought some of their planes down there. So we'll see if taking a little heat off Russia here helps out the Soviets. The Italians built some more guys at home here and actually cannibalized a few troops from down here. They took all the planes and they took a man and an artillery back and landed the man and the artillery in Albania. They annexed that, which doesn't mean anything to anyone except a bit of a victory condition for Italy to, you know, have more stuff than what they started with. So there's that. The British started building a factory in Gibraltar. Are you kidding me? That's under the because I've never tried it before, I think, is the main gist of that build. They also built some transports here at home. So they have 3 transports at home and they have 4 down here in Gibraltar. So the British are definitely the masters of the sea, and they still have their fleet down here. We'll see how long that sticks around if the Japanese get a bit more frisky. French moved up a little bit in Africa, built a couple more colonial troops, and the British flew their bomber down here to be with Mr. Airborne. And we'll see where he goes next round. Over here, Calcutta, the man-fighter artillery combo continues. And in Anzac, they bought, they saved their money last turn, remember, so they bought 1 airborne and a bomber. They have 2 airborne and a bomber, so some fun stuff that could be happening there. Well, the Japanese continue to punch at the Chinese, and they're losing a lot of infantry doing it, but they did have some great success with their aircraft again. Remember, aircraft are not really worried about mountainous territories, and they just go in there and start firing. So the Chinese are down. Looks like it's probably down to their last round here. They still have some militia, which of course cannot move, so I think that might be it for nationalist China, which is a huge victory condition, I believe, for somebody. Maybe it's for communist China. I don't know. I'll have to look that up again, but I know the Japanese player really wants to take care of China and then turn on anybody who's ticking them off. And this is where, you know, it leads right into Burma, right? There's no stopping them going that way. So maybe he's going to try to attack Calcutta from land, because that many guys shooting at your troops landing in the, and the artillery getting the first strike and all that could be pretty bloody. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what he's got in mind. He built some Marines at home and some infantry. And that's pretty much it for that side of the board, except for the Americans, who have decided with their big old stack of cash, they're up to $50 now, but they had 43 or something, 44 to spend last round. So they built a whole whack of Marines, built 8 Marines, and you're saying, how can he do that? Well, because they'd finished off his factories last round. So you got that, and they built a couple of tanks in the Great Plains. He has 5 transports, so Japan now has been taking too long, and that's the consensus around the table, is that the Axis have taken too long, and that the Allies are probably going to win this just by sheer economy. And I think it's looking that way too, but we're going to play another year or so and see how things look. But if it looks like Japan is having to protect the homeland constantly and can't expand anywhere, might be a pretty slow death here for Japan. But we'll see. I mean, they still have 3 battleships and a couple carriers here, and as soon as America's in the war, Japan will start cranking out the capital ships a bit more. But we'll see what happens here in 1942. All right, January 1942 is complete, and been some interesting developments. Of course, we'll start with Germany, and they have punched deep into the Soviet Union now and are at the gates of Moscow. Not a huge force, and the Russian player declined to come out and meet him there, even though he could have probably wiped out the tank. Who knows? His infantry are only attacking it at 2, so I might want to save them for defense. They'll be in the city, so they'll get some bonus there. Plus, they have the fortress. So, you know, sometimes defense is a good offense, but we'll see. The Germans have a small stack of tanks, but some more infantry coming and more tanks on the way, of course. They also finally went up and took Norway with some help from the Air Force, and that's why there's more planes stationed here now. One's an air transport, of course, for the drop. Oh, we got to do a roll for the ship, and we got to destroy that gun. So why don't we do the roll for the ship right now? You can be part of the action. People are on break right now, so I'm just going to roll it, and they'll just have to believe me, but hey, I got film. 5. I believe 5 is scuttled, so yeah, not really exciting. And we'll get rid of the gun as well. Also here, they just put another guy into Paris. Not much more going on there. Just sending guys through. German player, when he gets back, we'll have to tell him he forgot to activate Bulgaria again. But Bulgaria, I mean, it's, you know, you just forget, right? But he's going to have to activate Bulgaria if he wants to get that infantry and the cavalry into Russia before the war is over. And let's see, what else went on here? Britain finished off the little factory, the minor factory they were building. And their fleet stayed down here. However, they did recall the fighter back to England. So it's back there. They built 3 artillery, and it looks like they're building a couple of factories in London. When you think about it though, folks, just building 5 units, when you start rolling in the dough pretty good, and right now England is up there making 29 bucks a round, you know, it's actually tough, especially if you're buying artillery and men, to find a spot to place those 5. Now he could build one in Liverpool as well, and of course he's got a major in Ottawa, and then he's got the minor in Cairo and the minor down here, and he can also spend money by building colonial troops anywhere around the globe, but it doesn't seem like a good use of money right now. Africa, the Italians still have done nothing here. The French have moved up though. It's taken a position there to the west of Cairo. The Italians though here did take Yugoslavia, and with some authority as well. They didn't do any amphibious because they didn't want to lose you know, their infantry and whatnot, and then have the artillery stuck on the ship. They only have the one transport, so they just brought guys from Albania and from Turin, and they were able to take it quite handily with the help of their Air Force, a couple of fighters and a tactical. So that went quite well. So they're up to 10 bucks now, double digits. Way to go, Italy. Cairo just built another artillery. Oh, and the British had their bomber and the airborne down there, and they just flew them over to Mauritania. So they're there right now, and they'll have some fun next round, I am sure. Calcutta, typical build, artillery manned fighter. But they also moved their fighter from their light carrier into Calcutta. I think they sensed something is up because, lo and behold, the Chinese have finally fallen. They do have militia left, but that is it, and we know they don't move anywhere, and that land isn't worth anything, so that'll just be an afterthought for the Japanese. But right now they got a stack of about 7 or so mountain, plus the artillery and whatnot, right on the road here, the Burma Road. Plus they have a bunch of guys back here, Marines and whatnot, that can do a landing. So all of a sudden Calcutta probably felt like it was fairly safe, and now the Japanese do obviously have the ability to punch through, especially with their sneak attack, which is rather devastating. So Calcutta could be a prime target. And down here in Sydney, they just built 3 men after seeing the Japanese stack everything up there quite easily in China. So Japan did build another strategic bomber, and they built some Marines, and they built a destroyer. America continues to build up in San Francisco, spending nothing in the Atlantic. Built a handful of more transports and some more things there. So they did have a bit of a bummer on the die roll, though. He only rolled a diminutive 2, so he's at 52 right now. Still not high enough to declare war. Waiting for that good old 63, I believe it is. No development happened, though. They've kept that pretty quiet. There are the 2 British factories being built in London, and the rest of this stuff hasn't moved at all. So we shall see what the rest of 1942 brings. This is typically the year, the turning point, the high tide, the high water mark for the Axis. And it's doubtful whether Moscow is going to fall in the next turn or two. But you never know. I mean, strange things have happened. They do have a decent air force. They can get over there, and yeah, we'll see. These Germans can be sneaky, and we'll see what they plan on doing. Oh, by the way, the Russians learned from the loss of Kiev to move things before they die. So they took the factory out of Stalingrad and moved it over to Novosibirsk. So now they can build 2 things a turn. You can't use it once you move it, so that infantry that got built there was just built with the other factory. But now that there's 2 factories, they can build 2 units a turn out there. Although I don't think they will be doing much of that unless Japan stirs the pot out here against Russia, which it really doesn't look like they're going to do, but I've been wrong before. Alright, well, let's see if this is the high tide of the Axis or if there's more to come. Alright, see you in a minute. Well, the year 1942 is over, and it's, for the most part, been a kinder, gentler World War II. Not a ton to report on. The Germans continue to build up fast units here. Tanks, of course, throughout Eastern Europe. Pulling things around thanks to their great rail system. They're able to get men up to the front a little faster, although they hit the brakes because there's only 2 allowed to move in the Soviet Union. So they only go forward a little bit. But they're starting to surround Moscow. And as we know, when you surround a city, all of its defenses are -1, everything. So maybe that's Germany's plan, is to surround it, maybe goad the Russians into attacking and bringing out some of their forces and chopping them up piecemeal. I don't know, but what looked like a pretty good Allied game got a little dark here pretty quickly. So the British had finished off those. They finished off those 2 minor factories. And one is, and then they built, some men. Oh, and for those of you shaking your heads at my mistake about the Norwegian fleet there, of course, when Oslo was attacked, the Norwegian destroyer should have become aligned with the Brits, and then the Brits could use it. So, yeah, the Brits just took it over, and now it's parked happily with the home fleet. The other British fleet remains here at Gibraltar, ready to cause grief. The bomber and the airborne man flew up to Gibraltar. The Italians making some more money now because they're making some more gains in southern Europe. They took Greece, and they also went and landed in Crete because, you know, why not? It's a great spot to land, actually, should there be an altercation with the Royal Navy in this corner. So it's something to keep in mind for those of you who play Italy. Italians also built their first tank of the game. And they cost 7 though, so it's kind of pricey. But again, no attack, of course. They just don't have the horses right now. Although Cairo hasn't been built up this turn, so maybe they gained a turn by building that armor. We shall see. Not much else going on down here. The French spreading out a little bit, built a couple more of the colonial troops there in the Belgian Congo. Calcutta has run out of its little bonus money that it had. It had 17 for the longest time because it had saved some money, but now it's back down to earth at 16. So instead of the fighter, artillery, and man, it's a fighter and 2 men going forward. They're at war, and as long as the Suez and Aden are controlled by Britain, then they get the +2. So good for them. Japan, as we know, wiped out China, and now they have stacked everything they own in Yunnan, and it is decidedly cut off from the rest of the world. But they still also have 10 Marines and Special Marines, Elite Marines here, with 5 transports, and who can forget the Imperial Japanese Navy, because there you go. And over here they built 5 more transports and some more troops, and they put a destroyer on escort duty. That's kind of interesting. We'll see about that. Down here, the Anzac had the FEC destroyer that was up by Salib's come down, and they just built 3 more men. And the Americans, well, what can I tell you? They built 7 destroyers and put them all on escort duty. So, as you know, escort duty is all along whatever line you happen to be on, and with the Japanese having 3 submarines there to do some damage, they thought they'd stop that. Now, granted, the line's only worth 3, but hey, why even take a chance at losing $1 if you don't have to? The Soviets built another 10 men in Moscow and built a man and an artillery in Novosibirsk in that freshly moved factory. But German armor and infantry and planes, I mean, everything is coming this way. We'll see what we see on the next turn. It'll be January 1943 coming up. Oh, and the Germans took Norway as well, the rest of it. They took Narvik, so they got a nice little bonus for that. All right, we'll see you in 1943. And just a little note, because the German player is mad at me, he did activate Bulgaria, so there you go. Good for you. There you go. Well, it's finally happened. America is in the war. So we'll tell you how that happened after we go over what happened here in Europe. Well, over here we got the Brits have decided to land in Normandy. Alright, so just a little excursion by 3 artillery and 3 men. So we'll see what the Germans do about that on the next round. Denmark has been taken by the Germans, and they destroyed the torpedo boat destroyer that was there, of course. Attacked it at the same time. Let's see, what else happened? The Germans built a whole bunch of speedy units again. Not building a lot of men. They did build a few there in Western Germany, but most of their stuff is quick-moving things. And they're moving a lot of stuff quickly over to the east. Leningrad is now surrounded, so they're in a bit of trouble. But also Moscow here, you'll notice that there's a few fewer guys there. That's still 36 infantry. It's no cakewalk or anything. But the Russians did a little sortie with their aircraft and a few men, and they ended up retreating. They did kill, I think, 3 or 4 tanks and a motorized and a mechanized or something, but they did kill a few things, but they took it on the chin. They took 8 casualties, I think, in the first round, so they decided to retreat. They weren't planning on taking the train anyway, I don't think. I think they just wanted to take out a few fast units, because there was no infantry in there. But alas, they really took a walloping doing it. But I guess their aim to take down some armor was accomplished. The couple of infantry down here in the northern Caucasian mountains here died. And if you'll notice, if you haven't played the game before, you'll notice that these 2 territories are worth 8. Now they're out of the way, but holy cow, that's a lot of coin. So yeah, a couple artillery, you know, it's almost a plane every turn just for those 2, so well worth the trip. The Italians continue to remain fairly neutral, but they did go and attack Turkey, because why not? So they went into Istanbul and just went across the land from Greece, because they had all their troops in Greece. There was no amphibious assault or anything. In fact, their lone transport went back here. Oh no, the transport, pardon me, took the guys from Crete down to Africa, and then they built a transport so that they can transport those guys back down. But now, Italy has gone from $7 to $13 in like 3 rounds. So, probably wishing he had done that earlier, get some more coinage going. But now, because he attacked Turkey, he just is allowed to fight it because he is not alliance. We're going to have to check the rule on that, but I believe we figured out that Turkey might be aligned with the Soviet Union, and that the Soviet Union can use this stuff, but again, Italy's not at war with the Soviet Union, and yeah, so we're going to have to wait and see. We'll have to comb through the rules a little bit, and we'll give you an update on that when we got it. They did build a tank. That was a little while ago. That's about it down there. French moving up a little bit again, continuing the march of the ants now, 2 by 2 heading up there. British landing. Oh, we'll stay on this side of the globe right now. For all you flat earthers out there, yeah, the side of the globe. And here we have the Americans start to put some money here in the Atlantic, so they built some tanks and men and put some boats in the water as well. So they are trying to possibly make life miserable for Germany and possibly Italy if Italy ever decides to join up. Well, Japan did it. They didn't take Calcutta or anything, but they brought their whole fleet here along with 10 transports and all these guys and loaded them up. And the aircraft is still there. And they were able to take all this territory. So you're wondering, well, where did the guys who took Malay go? Well, after Japan does its freaky deaky move there where they do the sneak attack, then everybody who took part in that can do one more non-com type of a move, like you can't initiate combat, so went and planted themselves there in Madras. And they're building up defenses at home, obviously, with this on the horizon. Now, remember, they got the kamikaze, which hit on a 7 or less. And if it's a 1 to 5 they roll, their kamikaze get to choose what they hit. So, yeah, the American Navy might be backing off again, but we'll see. We'll see what we see. The Anzac built a destroyer and saved some money. And Calcutta, of course, just building men at this point. So, just to keep their roll together, because Calcutta has gone from making $16, they're down to 8 now. They actually make 10 because they get a 2-point bonus for Aden and the Suez, but they're hurting for certain. So they're probably going to lose a couple more bucks this next round. So they will not be cranking out a lot of stuff. So I think they're going to stick to a steady diet of men. Well, who knows if the Axis waited too long to make their move. Britain is no longer spending money in Africa, as it doesn't see Italy as having the horses to take this. And with the French help, you know, they could be right. Plus, the Italians don't have anything at home, so if they do attack Britain or France, then this British fleet here, which has, you know, 4 transports and then a whole whack of stuff here, can just go and take Rome, you know, pretty as you please, because it's only got a black shirt in there. So, we will let you know how things go here. I don't know if there's going to be an attack on Moscow. It's looks a little easier than it did a turn ago, but it still looks like the odds would be in the defense favor. But we'll have to do some math, and we'll come back and let you know what 1943 will hold in the back half of it. The war's moving right along. All right, we'll see you in a moment. Well, it was worth the wait, folks. Things are starting to really heat up now. We have the Americans have brought some stuff over here. The stuff that was in the C-Zone 30 could make it. 43 had to stop in sunny Newfoundland. which was actually a British colony at the time. So if any of you are wondering why there's Canadian flags, roundels in that part, but on this part it's British, they were still considered British colonies. And just so you know, this island here is now called Newfoundland, and this part here is called Labrador, and together they make one province called Newfoundland and Labrador. There you go, from your friendly Canadian social studies geography teacher. The British continue to land stuff in Normandy. They've decided to keep everything together because the Germans scooted over for Mech using the rail movement that we know and love here in 1936. So they just scooted some guys over actually from Poland all the way over to answer the threat. Not much else going on here. Again, Italy marching through Turkey. Took the last spot that's worth anything. So they are now up to 14. They've doubled their income in about 4 rounds. So again, if you're the Italian player and you feel like getting some cash, I think this is the way to do it. I think perhaps leaving Africa alone seems to be a huge distraction for you. But again, it did suck an awful lot of British stuff down here and some American Lend-Lease and whatnot for the French. So, yeah, we'll see. Because if you do lose Africa, I mean, all you're losing is 2 points. It's not a big deal. And then you have the march down this way to get it. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. As far as Germany-Russia goes, Germany continues to gobble up land everywhere. Oh, we forgot to take the German roundel off of northern Russia. The Russians headed out there. There was just a couple of German infantry, and the Russians wanted to take care of him because, again, if a city is surrounded, they are -1 to all their defense rolls. And so sacrificing a couple of infantry to kill that guy is well worth it for everybody else, keeping their city defense bonus. But the Germans have it well and truly surrounded now, have a decent air group ready to go in Smolensk. So we'll see. This could be the turn, folks, where the common turn ceases to be much of a power. They still will have a capital here in Novosibirsk. But right now they're down to $14 with that one. We got to change the boards there. So not looking too good. Things are not looking too good for the Allies down here in Calcutta either. You can see there's a couple of, I'll try to zoom in a bit here. You can see there's a couple of blue chips under the factory. That's 20 damage. That's the max it can take because, hey, all these Bettys came in there and beat the tar out of that industrial complex, and now that the FEC isn't making very much, they made 8 last round, they're making 5 now. They're just going to hang on to their money because there's no sense just fixing factories and then just having them bombed again. We've left the planes there. You're probably wondering what this little yellow and green token is. That's just showing us where all of those planes are right now. Alright, they just look really cool sitting in Tibet like that, so we just thought we'd leave them. The FEC did actually scramble. There are 6 fighters, and you know that if they get a 3 or less, they'll knock down some planes, but they didn't. But hey, the Japanese did. They knocked down 2 FECs. I think one of the bombers actually rolled a 1. So strategic bombing is a layered event, so make sure you check your rules on that. Down here, the Anzac, just building up guys, and they have also got the little, what do you call those things? Transports. Little transport that could, taking a couple of guys, hoping to get there, but he can only move 2 at a time now, so he's a couple turns away from helping out Calcutta. Who knows if Calcutta will still be around. Now, I might as well, since you've seen it already, I'll show you we've got a secret sub base. Yes, the Americans decided that they were going to build a secret sub base, and they rolled whatever the number is. What number is that? 6, 5, 4, 4. Yeah, he rolled a 4, and so the sub base ended up in Fremantle, Australia. So there you go. So there's a sub there and a sub base, and ready to wreak some havoc on the Japanese shipping. As Speaking of Japanese shipping, they came on over here, brought their whole fleet, and they finished off a carrier and plopped a couple of tacticals on it. The Americans charged in. Are you kidding me? Well, they probably figured now or never. So they charged in and took Sapporo, which isn't quite as gallant as going for Tokyo, but now they can attack Tokyo without suffering those, amphibious assault things where you can't bring your tanks with you. Unfortunately, they did lose a carrier with the 2 planes because the kamikaze was able to target. If the kamikaze gets 1 to 5 on the dice, he could target. So on one of the rolls, he got a 4, and so he was able to target the carrier. And of course, the planes have nowhere to land, so that was it for them. Also was able to take out a couple of transports, so there's less guys here than there would be otherwise. Left the destroyers alone, and he nicked a battleship. But now all the kamikaze are gone. Alright, so there's no more threat of that to the Americans. There is another threat growing over here, though. We do have the American building up their bombers. Alright, so the mighty 8th Air Force. And they're going to get a little bit of help, because we have the Americans who have now got long-range aircraft. They've been able to get that, and they're 2 ticks along with heavy bombers. They keep messing up on these rolls, but they just did 2 rolls last time, and they got their heavy bombers and their long-range aircraft. That's why they built some bombers. So they are going to be able to really head over there and do some damage. Now, this is where the game gets very fascinating. Remember, there are 3 teams, if you will. They're alliances, but there's 3 groups of players in this game. One group is the Allies, which is British and the US and the FEC and France and China and Anzac, okay? And then you have the Axis. We all know and love them, the Germans, the Italians, and the Japanese. But then you have the Comintern, which of course is the Soviet Union and Communist China. You remember them. And in this case, Republican Spain, because the Republicans actually won the Civil War, and they've been quietly building up their strength, hoping to annoy Germany and possibly the Allies. So you're trying to get your victory conditions. Alright, so as bad as things look here for the Comintern, and trust me, they look bad. It'll be interesting to see how the rolls go here. Things look really bad, but it's no guarantee that the Axis will win the game, because while Germany is pouring a ton of time, money, and energy over here, the Allies are building up a lot here, and Italy has been fairly impotent, and at some point Italy's going to have to pull the trigger here, or else the Axis just won't be able to get more victory conditions, than they should be able to. The Italians should be able to punch through a little bit here. They're not even getting their bonus for having no enemy warships, because they don't have any enemies right now, right? So it's not really good for them. The Japanese, finally, as we know, are rolling along, but and their victory conditions are alongside of the Axis, of course. So they're going to want to watch what those are and take care of those. I'm not going to go through them right now. Japanese player could do that for you, but he's not here. So just go ahead and make sure you look at your victory conditions, because we're getting down to it now. There's only 4 turns left, and that'll be the end of the war. And these Americans here, their goal might not be to take Tokyo. Right? That might not even be an option for them. Their goal might be to, land here and start liberating, some of China. Who knows? Now, the Japanese fleet is here, and I suspect they're going to slam into the American fleet and probably get rid of it, because there's not much for American power left, which will no doubt then strand these fellas. Okay? So we'll have to wait and see how this all pans out here in 1944. Those are just some thoughts I thought I would share with you. Some strategy thoughts, And many of you have played this game a lot, and you probably at some points have been screaming at the screen, why aren't people doing things? Just like to remind you though, folks, that people playing this game are really new at it. They're heavy into the rule book, and they're bringing all of their knowledge from all the old Axis and Allies games, the new versions of Axis and Allies, Historical Board Gaming's 1939 game. So they're bringing a lot of different rule sets in, and sometimes things get missed, and sometimes there's assumptions made. Sometimes there's responsibilities that are not, followed up on or not utilized. Some special moves or special considerations. We've even missed bonuses here and there. So just if you see people who made a move that you don't quite get or you don't quite understand, go easy on them. Everybody's trying their best here, and it's a pretty new game for most of the guys. So, all right, so that's what we got, and we'll come back with the January 1944 in just a minute. All right, I thought I'd just show you guys the Battle of Moscow here. It's pretty tense here. So guys have gone up to get a drink, and they'll be right back. But here we go. This is the German situation here. They've got 30 tanks. Okay, so the rest of the stuff you can kind of count. 4 fighters. You got about a dozen of the mechs and whatnot. You got 5 artillery, and you got about 15 infantry. And the Russians have, on their side, they got 41 infantry, and then some scattered stuff. But everything, all the infantry are defending at a 5 because they're in a city. So, place your bets. Who do you think's going to win this? Do you think the Germans will win it and stay, or do you think maybe they'll punish them for a while and back off and try again? Please note that the German player only spent 15 bucks on 5 infantry. He's saved most of his money. He had 80 some dollars, and he only spent 15 because if this goes well, he can spend it all in the West. Well, we'll see what happens in just a minute. And there's the pile of casualties. We stacked up some tanks, and then I said why. So there you go, folks. The battle is over. The defenders have been beaten, and there's still a good chunk of armor left. But kudos to the Soviet player. He took out a lot of guys at those infantry. The 46 infantry, I think, got 31 hits. Yeah, he rolled really, really well. So he took out all their infantry, their motorized, their mechanized, their artillery, and he got into their tanks on the first round. Unfortunately, he was almost wiped out in the first round. He only had a few things left at the end. So we'll let you know how the rest of 1944 goes right after this. Well, as you know, Moscow has fallen, and the Russians have named Novosibirsk their auxiliary capital. At least they could build a couple things there. I guess a little bit of foresight in moving the factory over there, but looks like the Comintern will not be much of a factor in this game. Germany saved most of her money, like we said, only spent 15 on some men. But they did leave a factory open here to some bombing, and getting bombed it did. So the British sent a couple of bombers over there and took some money out of that. But the Germans have built up Paris again. British keep landing stuff here, but are again staying concentrated for now. But German armor and infantry are headed west. So we only got a couple more turns left, with 3 more turns after this one. So we'll see what happens. The Americans have brought their troops up to Scotland. Britain took lone infantry up to Narvik. It will definitely die this round. The transport will. Not sure if the Germans are going to care about Narvik right now. We'll see if that's a victory condition for them. Again, that's something to look at, folks. There are victory conditions. It's not just, destroy, 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 although that's always fun. It's also take a look at what you need and go get it. So the Italians here in 1944 have yet to declare war on anyone, but they did take all of Turkey now. So now they can go into Iraq, they can go into Iran, and still not declare war on anyone. So we're going to see if this is a tactic that actually works out for the Italians. I'm not sure if there's a rule buried in there somewhere that says that they have to declare war sometime, but it just says that they're at peace and they can declare war on anybody kind of when they feel like it. But so far it just hasn't been a good idea for them, especially with this monstrous British fleet hanging off the side here in Gibraltar. And Gibraltar, you know, can be closed. Now the Italians, just so you guys know, since they're not at war with the British, the Italians can leave. They could head out the Suez. They could head out the Gibraltar Straits here. They could go out, no problem. But the deal is, as soon as war is declared, they couldn't get back in. So they're probably not going to be leaving anytime soon. This pile, by the way, is the dead from last round. It's like, good grief, it was a mess. The French just continue to nibble away here, trying to get some guys up to Egypt, but also to keep Abyssinia in line. Do you ever have those moments where you wish you just would have left the camera running? Well, we had one of those in Calcutta. The Japanese attack went in and did not fare so well. Didn't do horribly, but they decided to pull up stakes because they had lost too much stuff and decided to maybe save it for a round. But also knew that the Americans were coming, so they flew all their fighters and whatnot back, knowing that FEC is in no position to attack these guys. Looks like Japan is just going to hold off for a round. That little transport that did, and dropped off a couple of these guys in Madras. And you see the Anzac bomber. Well, you remember that down here they had built a couple of airborne guys. Well, there's only one left because they took an airborne troop and captured Singapore. Also, they have that sub that's up here doing some convoy raiding on the Japanese. Unsuccessful the first round because the Japanese actually have a destroyer on escort duty, so it stifled that. But the Japanese brought back all of their aircraft back to this point here, as well as some on the island, thinking that they were going to win the Calcutta fight and the naval battle I'm about to tell you about. They built a bunch of bombers, figuring, hey, we don't need anything else right now. Unfortunately, although they didn't lose the naval battle, they really didn't win it either. Every single capital ship got damaged. When the Americans defended themselves, the 7 destroyers, all 7 got hits. I don't know about these dice, because they go ice cold sometimes and then just smoking hot. And so, yeah, the Japanese had to tilt everything, and then they lost their cruisers and lost a couple of other things. It's just pretty nasty. And that was in this sea zone. That was in sea zone 56, where the Americans were. So then when they retreated, they came back here because they had 10 transports sitting there completely naked, and they figured, boy, if we lose any more boats, we're not going to be able to protect our transports. So they retreated, knowing that they had, you know, knocked the stuffing out of the American fleet as well. All the Americans have left is 2 damaged battleships and a cruiser. All the destroyers are gone. They couldn't hit the sub because there's no combat air patrol going on there. So they just they left the sub alone. Sub's pretty impotent anyway, as it stands for them. So the Americans, they pulled back from 56 and they took the islands of Bonin and Iwo Jima here, and they took them with some decent force, and also stacked up the bunch of bombers here on Wake, and then they built themselves a bunch more bombers because it looks like they're going to go into a bombing mode now and try to wipe out the Japanese fleet that way. And who knows, maybe FEC can, if Italy's going to keep playing nicely, maybe FEC can take some resources out of Cairo because they've got a couple transports here and bring them over. So that's something the British player is going to have to figure out if he wants to do. Anzac, of course, looks to be completely left alone now, and so they built another transport. I keep forgetting that word for some day today. I don't know, for some reason. That's late. All right, well, just a crazy round, folks. So that was the January 1944 round. We're headed into the back half of 1944, and we'll see if anything picks up here for Italy. I think the Italian player actually enjoys this, being able to basically do what he wants without having anybody come and get him. So we'll see if he keeps that up. Alright, we'll see about the Germany steamroller as well, because he's got basically all of his money from 2 rounds sitting up in the 80s. So he's got a ton of cash. We'll see if he does an Instafleet or what. It's going to be interesting. Alright, see you in a minute. Okay, so 1944 is in the books. And wow, how this game can change on a dime. We'll get you up to speed here. So the Germans built on their turn, I use the phrase Instafleet. Of course, you can't build capital ships and even the cruisers and whatnot without taking a few turns. So they did build 11 subs though. They built 10 just there in the space above Stettin in West Germany, and then they built 1 in the Leningrad port. And then they built 10 bombers. So yeah, and then it built a few tanks here and there, these 3 tanks. They had a lot of money. And then they took a bunch of tanks and moved them down to Italy. Well, how can they do that? Well, because on Germany's turn, Italy said, I'm declaring war on the Allies. So Germany could come and prop up Rome. So in case the Allies had designs to take Rome, it would be much more difficult. Well, that made the British kind of consider what was going on here, and so they have everything's still in the English Channel there. It's a little messy, but they built themselves 3 destroyers. Looks like red chip under that, but we took a couple off. Couple destroyers off. So we built 3 destroyers and a couple of men, and then we built a tactical bomber in Cairo. And as you can see, the Italians have moved into Egypt in force. They did take a bit of a beating from the French, so I doubt they have the horses left to actually take Cairo, but never know. You can also see that the Italian fleet is no more, and that's a big bonus for them. They want to have a fleet in there and no other enemy ships, but now it's just British. The British came up from here after the Italians declared war on the German turn. That gave the British license to come up here, and they wiped out everything. They brought their planes, they had the carrier there, they brought the bomber on over with... Actually, the bomber brought the airborne guy. And then this big fleet came over and dropped off. As you can see, there's 4 battleships in here now. 2 are damaged, but there's 4 battleships. So they just overpowered the Italians. There was no contest. Rome looks to be fairly safe, though. That's not going to be taken anytime soon. But Italy is no longer a threat, really, to Cairo. The planes that the Italians used in the attack all came down here and landed in Eritrea. Or Eritrea, depending on where you put your emphasis on which syllable. The Germans moved a big stack of tanks down here, and will be no doubt trying to do something about down here, but unfortunately for them, it looks like time's going to run out, because there's only 2 more turns left. 1945, the January and July turns. Japanese have returned to Tibet, so to speak. They're all in Yunnan, and it's just bigger space there. It looks like they may take another shot here at Calcutta, because Calcutta is still bombed to 20 damage. And so they haven't been able to build anything up, and so the Japanese might be just going for a Hail Mary here. We'll see. Now the Japanese did have their whole fleet. Remember, everything was damaged. They repaired everything, and they brought it all down here, only to be met by a whole bunch of American bombers. And so the American bombers really had their way with them, and were able to take out a number of ships. And you didn't take off the losses there, I think. We have to take off. I think he put his stack back. He took some hits. We'll have to go back and figure out how many hits. But he definitely lost some bombers there. But he flew some more bombers out to Wake. So looking to carry on the fight in the next couple turns. The United States has another fleet of bombers coming up here. Okay. Now remember, Japan and America are both fighting over who can have the most capital ships. That's worth a victory point. So over here, now that the Germans are building all these bombers, they decided to move their carrier, which can move 3, which means 4 with the shipyard. And they are moving it and trying, I'm assuming, to get it to the Pacific Ocean. So we'll see if they can get there on time and go 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, he's in the Pacific. So in 2 turns it'll no doubt be out in the Pacific. The only question will be how many of the Japanese ships will remain. But beyond that, folks, not a lot going on. We're getting down to it here, and the game kind of picks up at this point because you look at your victory objectives, and if there's no hope for you to get them, typically just hunker at home and pass the dice. So we'll let you know what happens here in the first half of the last year of the war, 1945. Alright folks, well it looks like we're going to call this one. All the guys have headed home because we are just plumb tired, just out of time. It's taken us a few days to actually finish the entire game, believe it or not. I know this video is probably not that long, but looks like the getting to the July 1945 turn won't make a difference as far as the victory objectives. So let's just take a look at them. We'll add them up and we'll see what we got. So this first one talks about Lebensraum, and you get objectives if you have all of these things. Now the funny thing is that it talks about it needs to be possessed by Germany, and Yugoslavia and Greece were captured by the Italians. Alright, so Germany gets 3 points for that. 3 points for the Lebensraum. Okay? And then they have the eliminate communism, score 1 victory objective if you control Moscow or 2, which we do. Okay? Gain resources, score 1 if all your bonuses and all the rest is, and it certainly is. We're actually at 84. We didn't even bother pumping it up 2 for the Netherlands there. Okay? And score 1 victory objective if the Nationalists won the Spanish Civil War. They did not. Okay, so we got 3 in the first one, 1 and 1. So we've got a total of 5 for Germany. So here we go. So we got 5. Alright, so let's see what Italy did. Italy seemed to have a pretty good game until it declared war, then things kind of went downhill. So for Italy, they score 1 victory objective for each new land zone Italy possesses at the end of the game, and they can get up to 2 points for that. Well, they definitely have 2 land zones. We know they were going to lose Egypt in the last turn. We didn't bother playing it though, because the most they can get is 2 points, and they definitely have those. So Italy gets 2 points for that. But the Mediterranean dominance, they don't get, and the Spanish nationalists didn't win. So Italy got 2 points for the Axis. And now we'll see how the Rising Sun did. Go to the Rising Sun, and here are their victory conditions. Okay, so colonialism. Score 2 victory objectives if at the end of the game Japan's total income is greater than 50, including bonuses. Okay, well, they get 38. Okay, and actually that is up. We didn't move up the Calcutta one because they did take Calcutta. So that's going to push it up to, Calcutta is 3, I believe. So that'll push it up to 41. Sorry for waving the camera on there, folks. Okay, so that's up to 41. And then they get 6 points for the coast, which puts them up to 47. They took back Melee, which we did not tack on. That makes it 49. And let's see what other sort of bonuses they get. And they get $2 for if they have Melee, which they do. Alright, that is good then. So they got 51. Alright, so the Japanese do get those 2 points for colonialism. Pacific security, Midway, Wake, Guam, Caroline, all that kind of stuff. or twice the capital ships as the Allies. Well, they have no capital ships, so they also, for Asian security, score 1 victory objective if they have as many forces on all shared Japanese-Soviet borders. Well, they have no more transports. Pardon me, sorry about that, folks. They have no more transports to move units. And the Russians can quickly zip guys over there to stop that bonus. So that's not going to happen. And raw materials, and they score 1 victory objective for each of the following up to 3. And they have Malay, but that's all they've got. They never did. Oh, they do have Hanoi and Saigon, so they get 3 for that. So they get 3 for that, and 2 for that. So they get 5 as well. Alright, so let's take a look here. You get 5. Okay, so they have 12 points for the Axis. Alright, well, let's take a look at the Allies now. Let's see how they did. We'll start with the US of A. And their bonuses are on the back, or the victory objectives, pardon me. Okay, the Monroe Doctrine. If there are no Axis or Soviet land units in the Western Hemisphere, and no land zone in the U.S. home country has been in possession, so that's okay. So they get 1 for that. Contain fascism. Germany and Italy are within their borders. That is definitely not true. Contain communism. Score 1 victory objective if worldwide there are less than 3 new nations or former colonies possessed by the Comintern. Okay, that is absolutely true. So that's 2 points they have. Pacific security, if they have twice as many capital ships. Well, Japan has none, and you treat that as 0.5, and they have 1. So they do have twice as much. Okay? So they do get that point, so they've got 3 so far. Maintain the empire, and score 1 victory objective if the U.S. ends the game in possession of all of its original territories as of 1936. Well, the ones you always want to look for are some of the islands, like the Philippines and maybe some of the other ones, but the Japanese really left them alone, was really trying to focus. So the Japanese player, you'll want to take a look at that. You'll want to keep the Americans from getting these easy ones. So that's 4 for the Americans. And score 1 victory objective if the U.S. has heavy bombers, jet aircraft, strategic rockets, and long-range aircraft tech at the end. And they don't. They have one of those. They've got the long range, but that's it. So they get 4 points. So America got 4. Take a look here. Okay. You got the KMT, good old China. So you score a victory objective at the end of the game. There are no foreign enemy troops. Well, there's lots of Japanese. Score 1 if China has possession of any 2, and they have none. Well, they do have 1 with the militia, but. And then score 1 if there are no CCP units left in China. And there are no communist units left in China, so they do get a point for that. So China, the KMT actually get a point. And they can thank the Japanese for that. So that's another thing, Japan. Maybe don't eliminate communist China. Alright, France. Disarm Germany. Yeah, that didn't happen. Less than 24 IPP in territory value, that's not even close. France does not have any Comintern troops adjacent to its home country, including in Spain. That's not true, because as we know, the Republicans won, and they're commies. And they are adjacent to the French home territory, so no bonus. And maintain the empire. The last little bit, the France has to be in possession of the French home country. They obviously are not. They did hang on to all of their colonies except for Hanoi and Saigon, so they did pretty well, but no bonus points from France. Let's see how Anzac did. You got one point possibly. Score 1 victory objective if there are no enemy troops anywhere in Australia or New Zealand, and there are no enemy warships in or south of the Netherlands East Indies. Well, it doesn't say Netherlands East Indies on here, but we're assuming that the Netherlands East Indies is where the Netherlands are here. So, but there are none, so they do get a point. So 1 point from Anzac. There you go, Anzac. And we'll see how Far East Command does. Far East Command, victory objective. This one's in pink. Preserve the Empire. Yeah, they don't have possession of all the land zones worth at least 1 IPP. So, nothing from Far East. Yeah, they kind of got shellacked there in the last couple of rounds. But they haven't held their territory for about 5 rounds, so. And the last gasp for the Allies. Contain communism? Well, I think that happened. The USSR has no units anywhere, really. Yeah, they got a couple of guys, but they don't count. Because they're out in the middle of nowhere. Maintain the empire. Does it have South African Union? Yes. Cairo? Yes. Aden? Yes. Contain fascism. Score 1 victory objective if Germany and Italy are within. They're not. So we have 2 so far. Mediterranean security. Twice as many capital ships as the Axis or possess. Yep, they've got all that. So that's 1. So that's 1, 2, 3 points so far. Preserve the empire. FEC, they don't get that one, of course. And they do get the South Pacific. So that's 4 points. Because they contain communism, they maintain the empire, they have Mediterranean security, and the South Pacific security. So 4 points. But just a little bit shy of where the Axis were. And the commies, well, we'll look just because we're polite and we want to make sure everybody gets a fair shake here. So the commies. If it says US possesses, then we skip it. So skip that, skip that, skip that. Well, this one was close. Score 1 victory objective if the USSR has twice the number of forces on all shared Japanese USSR land borders. Now, knowing that the game was ending, I think we have to give it to them that they would have shuttled guys over pretty simply. Just plop some guys over there. Because all they need to do is get 1 to Vladivostok, and then 2 in Amur and 2 in Chita. So could they do that in 2 Oh, actually they couldn't. So no, sorry, can't give you that one. And the last one is the ice-free port. Score 1 victory objective if the USSR possess a naval base bordering the Atlantic, North Sea, or Mediterranean, or possess Crimea and the Bosporus. Well, look at that. It's the North Sea. Is that the North Sea? Well, the North Sea. Hard to say what the North Sea is. So if they mean the North Sea is up here in northern Russia, they've got one. Because the Germans never took it back. So, or did they? Oh, you know, we forgot to move the tanks in. Sorry, Russia. Yeah, we forgot to slide those tanks in after they beat up that, there was a couple of troops out there. Sorry. So nothing there for Comintern from the Soviets. We'll see if the Communist Chinese get anything. Here are their victory. Score 2 victory objectives at the end of the game if there are no foreign military units from any nation in China, but there are. And score 1 victory objective if at the end the CCP has more land units in China than the KMT. No, the KMT has 2 militia. So sorry, nothing for the Comintern. That was a rough game for the Comintern. They did win the Spanish Civil War, but at what cost? So here we go, folks. The first game of 2018. We have the Axis with a narrow victory over the Allies. And as things are going right now, I don't see that changing anytime soon. So there you have it. Thanks so much for watching, folks. Again, a lot of guys playing the game today. It's their first time playing. Well, today, these days, it's their first time playing, and they're just testing the waters, testing things out. So if you see anything, you know, comment gently. And if you have any ideas about more strategy people can have to maybe keep the Comintern alive a little longer, let us know. If you think Italy should attack sooner, go ahead and throw your hat in the ring on that one. I'd love to hear the discussion. Thanks so much for watching. Everybody take care, hug your loved ones, and may the dice be with you.